We interrupt this record to bring you a special bulletin. The reports of a flying saucer hovering over the city have been confirmed.
Did you really go out with an alien? Uh-huh. What was it like? Real different.
Becoming Human, a Mork and Mindy podcast. Hello listeners, this is Paula Scheffner with episode 54, Gunfight at the Morkay Corral. This was the last Mork Mindy episode to air in 1980, since it was December 18th and the next week would be Christmas. The IMDb synopsis is, a boy at Mork's daycare becomes obsessed with Billy the Kid. This was the last of 5 Mork Mindy episodes directed by Jeff Chambers. It was the only one written by Stuart Gillard, who was then 30, and he's still alive as of this recording, although he switched over to directing. I just want to mention that he also did one of the best Three's Company episodes, Chrissy's Night Out from 1977. He also wrote a Cork episode, so he'd already written for Conrad Janis, and he co-wrote the screenplay with Tom Sullivan for the movie If You Could See What I Hear. There's a sunny exterior of the house with the flowers still blooming, and the Jeep is parked out front with the station wagon ahead of it, and I don't know if that's Mr. Bickley's station wagon or a neighbor's. There's a knock. Fred lets himself in. He's got his jacket over his arm, and he's got a toolbox in his hand. Fred says good morning. He goes into the kitchen. Mork and Mindy are standing, and they look over at him. He's been working on Mindy's Jeep for over an hour, and he can't find anything wrong with it. She says the battery's dead. He says, oh. She says when she woke up that morning, the battery is already dead. She can't understand what happened. Mork asks if leaving the car lights on all night would have any effect on that. She says, why, yes, it could. Why would you ask? And he says, no reason at all. With her hand on her hip, she says, Mork. He says there's a good reason. Fred says there's always a good reason. He says, you understand, Pops, don't you? Mork says there was a cute little old wino outside, sleepy in the gutter. So Mork left the lights on so no one would park on him. Mindy says he sure is courteous. Fred now has a cup of coffee, and he says after he finishes his coffee, he'll drop Mork off at the daycare center. He says, thanks, Pops. So yeah, he's still back to calling Fred Pops. This episode seems to take place in just one day, and Mindy doesn't seem to have to go anywhere. We know that she's no longer going to college. I assume at this point she's not working, and of course with her Jeep not working, she can't really go anywhere for most of the episode anyway. But you'll notice that she's in the same outfit the entire time. Red slacks and a blue sweater with red and blue flowers on it. I really like that Mindy's Jeep is more prominent this season than it's been in a very long time. It actually affects the plot a couple times. Mork says he has opening night jitters. He's already got flop sweat. He doesn't have a costume yet. Mindy tells Fred that Mork had a really good idea about the kids dressing up as their favorite heroes. And of course, if the daycare kids are going to dress up, Mork will too. Fred says kids today could use some heroes. When he was a young boy, he looked up to the Western heroes. Roy Rogers, Gene Autry, Tex Ritter. You could always tell who the good guys were because they all wore big white hats and played guitars. He always used to wonder why they never rode into town playing a violin, and so that has to do with him liking classical music.
That's probably because all the Indians had the bows. Imagine Custer's last concerto.
So yes, Mork makes a pun on Bo, and we can see that Fred and Mindy are very amused by this. I would say that this is one of the episodes where Mork possibly does the most celebrity imitations, more so as the episode goes on. Fred's favorite Western hero was the Lone Ranger. Mindy says that's a real good one. She says Mork would like the Lone Ranger because he always settled fights peacefully. I did a quick look online. I try not to do this, but apparently there were episodes before where Mork actually knew who the Lone Ranger was. And I want to mention that Fred has something in common with Fonzie, who also really admired the Lone Ranger. And that's actually a Happy Days plot. Mork says it's a parallel universe. They have someone like that on Ork. Well, he's more like the lone chicken. Whenever there was trouble, he'd always hide. His favorite motto was, when the going gets tough, the tough go shopping. So this is another episode where people are talking like bumper stickers. Mindy says that sounds like the Gabor sisters to her. Mork decides to go as this hero, who's known as Squelman the Yellow. Fred says, what a strange planet, making a hero out of someone who does nothing but hide. What does he look like? Mork says, I don't know. No one has ever seen his face. All we saw was his yellow feathered tush hightailing it into the sunset. Then he sings happy tales to you. And Mindy and Fred are again amused. In this episode, we're back to the thing of pacifism being confused with cowardice. And that's still not really resolved any better than it was back in Mork's Greatest Hits. But it is a continuing thing. And I believe on Mork's Greatest Hits, we had the thing of the whole planet of Ork hiding from an attack, I think from the Necrotons. There's a sunny daytime exterior of the Pine Tree Daycare Center playground. It looks like before, and again, there's about a dozen people. Mork in voiceover says, able to leap tall buildings with a single boom. It's a turkey. No, it's Squelman the Yellow. So, of course, he's referencing Superman, and we're continuing this season 3 thing of people being called turkeys. Mork leaps into the room wearing what looks like the top half of a chicken costume, and he's got a red S on his chest. He's also wearing blue tights and red and yellow knee-high socks. The crowd laughs and applauds. Mork says that Squelman is a proud coward with a golden tail. This looks like the same daycare set as on the skating episode, and we've got kids sitting in plastic chairs from stage right to stage left, so from the left of your screen to the right. It's Stephanie in a blue and yellow, I would have guessed, pioneer costume. There's a black boy who has glasses and a briefcase. He's wearing a suit. He doesn't have any lines, and I'm guessing he was supposed to be a lawyer. Then we have Lola in a white suit and a wide brim white hat, white shoes, and a pink turtleneck. There's a white girl in another prairie or pioneer outfit that's pink, and she also doesn't have any lines. There's an empty chair for Mork. And we have Jonathan dressed as a boxer, and he's got gloves and a black robe. We'll see in a little while that Billy is off to the side, sitting by a table, maybe about 6 feet from Jonathan. Mork wonders who's up next and decides it's Jonathan. Jonathan stands and says he'll give you a hint. He does a few boxing moves and then says Sugar Ray Leonard. Someone in the audience squeals. Mork says one more hint and he can get it. Jonathan sits. Sugar Ray Leonard, who is 67 as of this recording, boxed from 77 to 97, and it looks like his first world title was November 30th, 1979, and he was definitely a rising boxing star at the time of this episode. Stephanie says, speaking of sugar, when do we eat?
Stephanie, you just had lunch, and very few people can eat a whole turkey and live. Now, who's your hero, Stephanie?
Sarah Lee.
I might have guessed.
Stick a brownie in your ear.
Stephanie, if you keep this up, one day you're going to go in an elevator and it's going to say, capacity, you. Who's your hero, Lola?
Truman Capote. For his accurate, yet lyrical portrayal of the human condition.
Lola, one day you're going to have a talk show all of your own.
I like how Stephanie remains defiant despite Mork's fat shaming. Lola admires Truman Capote, and I was expecting Mork to do an imitation, but he didn't. Again, we have this thing of Lola admiring intellectuals that little kids would have heard of. I don't know if she ever mentions any female intellectuals. Mork asks who Billy's hero is. Billy is dressed as a doctor. The last name on his badge looks like Phillips, so I don't know if his name is Billy Phillips. His dad picked his hero for him. His dad wants him to be a doctor like him. Mork says that's not a bad hero. They save lives, they play great golf, and they never bother you at home, so a reference to doctors not making house calls anymore. Jonathan nods and shrugs. Billy says, big deal, my dad won't let me be who I really want to be. His hero is the one with his name, Billy the Kid. He was a tough hombre. His dad never told him what to do. Mork says, isn't that the president's brother, the one that helped Reagan get elected? This time there is much audience reaction. There wasn't a lot of reaction to the peanut joke on the previous episode, but they really did like the Billy Carter joke. Jonathan shakes his head, waits for things to quiet down, and says, no, Mork, he was a famous cowboy. People say he used to live in that old ghost town near here. Mork says a ghost town is the ultimate retirement village. Imagine the maid changing the sheets up there. And then he demonstrates with a little scream. Billy gets up from his chair and says that Jonathan meant Windy Gulch, the old town outside of Boulder. He goes over and puts his arms on Mork's shoulders. This Billy bets that Billy had fun out there. He got to camp out and never eat broccoli. There's a cut to Stephanie and the lawyer kid looking interested but wary. Mork tells him to come as Billy the Kid if he wants to. Billy is very happy and shakes Mork's hand. Mork says, "Oh, shucks and wazoo, little Yoda," different catchphrases. He says that's it for today, kids. And by that he means sharing their heroes. They all stand. It's time for their field trip. Today they're going down to the chemical plant by the river and watch the dead fish race. They all head to the front door. So, you know how I said I'd be worried about kids showing up at Mork's house? I think this would actually be more concerning to parents. This is the last we'd see of all of these daycare kids in this episode, except for Billy. I just want to give a special shout out to Jonathan Ian, who manages to hold it together, not break character, and wait for the reactions to Robin Williams to die down before he does his lines, which are mostly straight this time. He'd be back for one more episode later in the season. There's another sunny exterior of the house, still with the Jeep and the station wagon out front. Mindy is sitting on the bar stool. She stands up as Mork comes in the front door, piggybacking on Exodore. She makes a face and says, "Oh no," but the crowd, of course, is delighted. Mork thanks Exodore for the ride. Exodore says, "Lucky for you, the Shriners canceled," like he was going to give piggybacks at a Shriners convention. He tells Mork that he's going out of town and he'd like him to take all his phone calls. He hands him a phone receiver with the cord attached. Mork asks where the receiver is, although that's not the base of the phone. Exodore says he doesn't know, he just doesn't want anybody calling him long distance. As Mindy heads to the bedroom, she says, "I'm sure you two boys have a lot to chit-chat about, so I'll just leave you two alone." Still holding the phone, Mork goes over to her. He confidentially says Exodore is their friend. She quietly says Exodore is his friend. She tells him that quite a few people think Exodore is a little strange. So even though they're trying to talk quietly, Exodore's not that far away. And he hears what they're saying and says, "I've heard those ugly rumors and they're grossly exaggerated." And then he asks if they have any chinchilla dip. And I don't know if he means like chippin' dip or like sheep dip or what. Mindy tells Mork that she rests her case. Mork tries to reach her with the phone as she exits. Then he comes back to Exodore, sets the receiver next to Mindy's phone, and puts an arm around Exodore. Exodore is going away on a very secret trip, so secret in fact that he's blindfolded his burrow. Some call it kinky, he calls it security. So another perverted Exodore line. And yes, he still has the burrow. Mork whispers, "Hush-toned, why is it so secret?" Exodore says there's a fortune buried out there. He points left, so Mork looks up. Exodore pulls out a map from his robes. He inherited it from his late grandfather. He adds, "He's deceased, you know." Mork notices that there's nothing on this map. Exodore says that's a necessary precaution. He takes the map back. Besides, he's got it all right here, and he points at his head. Mork guesses that Exodor's memorized the map. Exodore has had it tattooed on the inside of his eyelid. So among other questions, wouldn't that mean that the tattoo artist knows what the map looks like? He calls to Steinmetz, Pepe, and Rito. Rito is new, I think. Steinmetz is his follower that we've heard of the most. Pepe was the one that created a wedge between him and his future and now forgotten bride. He tells his followers to load up the burrow and pile on. He's an equal opportunity employer. I don't know what ethnicity Rito is. Exodore grins and nods. Mork says, "All those people in one burrow? That's incredible. Those amazing animals." This is not only the second or third reference to the TV show That's Incredible, but I think it's the first reference to the series Those Amazing Animals, which was in that real people genre of cute little stories and clips and so on. And it had premiered in August of 1980, so it was very new at the time of this taping. Exodore and Mork are now at the door. Exodore says if Mork should get a postcard saying, "Wish you were blank," he'll know who it's from. He'll be back in about a month, so we'll see how long it is until the next Exodore episode. By the way, I was waiting for some sort of payoff that Exodore would be in the ghost town, but no, they just bring him in for this scene. Doesn't really affect the plot. It gives us a chance to see Exodore. He yells out the window, "Frankie, Annette, surf's up!" Don't know if that's the name of the burrows or whether he thinks Frankie Avalon and Annette Funicello are going with them. It's never explained. He dashes out the front door. The audience claps and cheers. Mork does an over my head sign with a sound effect and he closes the front door. He goes to Mindy's open bedroom door. He tells her she can come out now. Exodore's gone. Mindy returns and says Exodore was gone when he got here, like mentally gone. She goes over to the kitchen and Mork follows. She hopes that his day's been going better than hers. His idea about heroes went well, except for Billy. He gives her a quick recap as she takes out orange juice in a glass. She tells him that Billy the Kid was a murderer who killed 21 people. One internet source says it was only 9. A although that still makes him a murderer. Mork says she doesn't know that for sure. You know how people gossip at funerals. I think Mork has only been to 2 funerals, like some relative of Mindy's and the butterfly maybe, and I doubt that was the gossip. Mork says Billy the Kid must have done something to become famous. Mindy says sometimes people become famous for the wrong reasons. She says kids always imitate their idols, so it's better for everybody if you pick somebody good as your hero. He says she's right and he was wrong. He wonders, why do Morks rush in where wise men fear to tread, like Morks are fools? There's a honk out stage. He says, boy, that goose must weigh a ton. Mindy goes to look out the window. It's the tow truck. She grabs her purse. She says she'd better get out there before her auto club card expires. She opens the door and says hi to Billy. He comes in as Mindy heads down the hallway. He's now dressed as a cowboy, including a toy gun and a black hat. And of course we learned from Fred that white hats are good and black hats are bad. Mork says, hey there, little buckaroo. He says, howdy, Mork. They shake hands. Mork tells him to knock his feet together twice and they'll do a little chapstick. So pun on, I think, slapstick and chapstick and chaps and shtick. He calls him Urban Cow Kid, which is a reference to Urban Cowboy, the John Travolta movie that came out in June of 1980 and was quite a sensation. Billy wants to go to the old ghost town and have a shootout. Mork says he can't go because he has to stay here and help Mindy bury her dead battery. I guess they'd have another funeral. As they step down to the living room, Mork tells Billy that he didn't realize that Billy the Kid was into retroactive family planning, which is quite the joke for a sometimes kids show. Billy insists that Billy the Kid was a hero. Mork is just saying that because he's a fraidy cat like Squelman the Yellow. Mork takes this as a compliment, but says he still can't go. Billy says it's just a game. Mork tells him game or no game, it simulates violence. He says if you really want to understand Squelman the Yellow, let's play his favorite game, Cherchez-moi, which means hide and seek. Literally it means look for me. Billy says, okay, but I'm warning you, Billy the Kid's smarter. I'll be it, and you go hide. Billy puts his head down on the bar stool and starts counting. Mork goes over to the armoire and gets in with a mischievous laugh. We can see that his spacesuit is still hanging up in there. He closes the door. I was just thinking, if Billy saw the spacesuit, maybe they could distract him and make him want to become an astronaut or something. Billy lifts his head and says, adios, turkey, as a cowboy, and he goes out the front door. Mork says, ollie ollie oxen free, and he says that Billy will never find him because he studied with Claude Rains, so a reference to that Invisible Man movie. Mindy returns and says the Jeep's fixed. I thought that because it was a tow truck, they're going to tow it away, but I guess they were able to restart the battery. Mork tells Billy, you're not even close, you're not even tepid, like warm, cold, and so on when you're doing hide and seek. He gives him a hint, Liberace, which is a reference to Liberace still being closeted at that point. Mindy goes over to the armoire, asking what's going on. She opens that door. Mork tells her quiet. He's playing hide and seek with Billy, and he's really skunking him. He hasn't got a chance. Mork bark laughs. Mindy says, no, you're not. I just saw him take off down the street on his bike. He said you'd know where to find him. Mork steps out of the armoire, closing the door. He's worried Billy's going to go down to Windy Gulch. Mindy recognizes the name as the old ghost town near here. She asks why. He tells her that Billy wants to have a shootout. Mindy thinks they'd better go get him. Mork says Billy is his responsibility. He'd better go get his trusty 45. Mindy says she thought Squelman was a pacifist. Mork says that's his manual, 45 ways to hide. He takes her hand. There's a sound of wind gusting with a stock shot of a ghost town. Mindy in voiceover says, you look in the saloon and I'll check the livery stable next door. It looks like from the backwards letters that they're at the Jack Carter saloon, and I didn't know if that was a reference to anybody or if it was just an old set. This saloon has cobwebs, dust, and tumbleweeds. Mork calls to Billy, and then as an Irish priest calls himself Father Mork. So yes, he's pretending to be a priest again. He says Billy shouldn't be here. He should be home watching TV with the other little kids, eating cereal and getting hypoglycemic, so reference to how sugary kid cereals were at that time. Something lands on the floor, making a puddle. The camera angle changes to show Billy on the landing, holding a red water balloon. He says, don't move, varmint, I've got the drop on ya. Mork in his normal voice tries to reason with him, but Billy throws the balloon at Mork's feet. He says he told Mork not to move. He says he's got a balloon in here with Mork's name on it. He's taking them out of a brown satchel that's next to the stair railing. Mork says, you don't want to continue this game and scare the orc chips out of Uncle Mork, do you? Billy says, yeah. Mork says, oh, just checking. So again, we have Mork calling himself Uncle Mork and swearing by saying orc chips. Mork protests some more, then Mindy comes in. He tells her to be careful. Billy might have a name with her name on it, and he says that her name would be Perky. I just want to mention, they always refer to Mindy as Perky. I don't know that she actually is that perky. Mindy says she doesn't know what's going on here, but Billy is coming home with them right now, and she calls him young man. Billy says, sure, push me around just because you're older than me, just like my dad. Some very clear psychological issues going on here. Grabbing Mindy's arm, Mork says if they make him go home right now, he'll always think that violence is the right way. Mindy says Billy is just a little kid. They can't wait till he grows up. Mork says Mindy doesn't understand. There are dueling philosophies here. Violence against non-violence. Like Gandhi versus Dirk the Bruiser.
You understand? It's like, I don't want to hurt the little kitty.
Give it to me now. Leak the thing on the hoof.
That's what I'm trying to say to you, man.
Gandhi, of course, doesn't need any explanation. Dirk the Bruiser was a wrestler. Mindy tells Mork to do it his way. Billy says it's time for a showdown. He takes a balloon out and hands it to Mork as he says they each get one. If Billy hits Mork, Billy's the best. And I think by that he means Billy the kid, not himself. If Mork hits Billy, then Skolman's the best. Mork says, you're on. Billy steps down and heads stage right. They face off with Mindy by the window looking on. Mork says Skolman doesn't use weapons. He throws his balloon onto the floor and it bursts. Mindy goes over to Mork to tell him that she doesn't think something. Billy says, okay, sucker, and throws the balloon. It hits Mindy on the back. She turns, and it looks like Pam Dauber is trying not to laugh. Mindy clings to Mork, trying to get her balance. Mindy chases after Billy, who runs out the swinging doors. Mork tries to stop her and says "min" a bunch of times. She laughs like she wants to get Billy. Mork says he hopes she appreciates the subtlety of his philosophy. She looks understandably annoyed. He tells her to look at the good side. She could always win a wet sweater contest. She looks even more annoyed. So another somewhat suggestive line, although it's not like it's a clingy sweater. And for some reason she doesn't take it off. Assume she had a blouse on underneath. She just continues to wear this wet sweater for the rest of the episode. There's a different exterior, the ghost town, and I like that we can see a worn looking sign that says Strawberry Hotel, and a tumbleweed blows by. Billy peers in the hole in the saloon window. He enters with a blue balloon in his hand. He approaches a figure lying on the floor, covered in a horse blanket with a brown cowboy hat and rainbow suspenders on top. Billy throws a balloon and says, "Ha ha, got you, Mork. I win." Mork jumps up from behind the bar. He says, "Not so fast, Billy. Mind over splatter instead of matter. Viva la Squellman." There's brief laughter and applause. Billy says, "Oh yeah, it's not over yet, Mork." He runs out of the saloon. Mindy gets up from behind the bar next to Mork. She looks dubious. She doesn't think this is going to work. He says they've got to do something to help Billy. She says somehow they've got to prove to Billy that being an outlaw is only exciting in the movies, that Butch and Sundance weren't heroes. They were only, and then with a smile she says, handsome. He looks at her with raised eyebrows and she keeps smiling. This was probably the flirtiest moment of the episode. Mork says, "Wait a minute, bingo." And then he says that that's an old religious saying on Orc. And again, it's never consistent about whether religion exists on Orc and what forms it takes.
I think I've a way of ending this confrontation, men. I think there's a solution to the possible violence that's escalating before our eyes. First of all, we have to find young Billy, the young person who's just in prison right now, who attempted to assassinate me with agua pura. And if we find him, we must convince him why Billy the Kid never became Billy the adult. When we do that, we'll have a solution to this violent problem that we have today before. Rosemary, did you get all that? Good. Erase it.
The subtitles on the DVD indicate that the Rosemary part is done as JFK, which makes this even darker. But yeah, again, we get Mork doing Nixon. We can see that Mindy is very amused. There's a cute moment where she playfully punches him. There's another exterior, the ghost town, and the wind is blowing. The sky is still clear blue. It's just a very sunny December in Boulder and the outskirts. Mindy is in the saloon. She loudly tells Mork that she's going down to the gas station to call Billy's parents. I don't know how far the gas station is. Presumably it's walking distance. She tells Mork to wait here to see if Billy shows up. She leaves the saloon. Billy is at the top of the stairs with a yellow balloon. He looks around and straightens his hat. He tells Mork, "Come on out, you lily-livered coward." Mork enters the saloon wearing a brown hat and a brown serape. He walks slowly, doing the ching-chings of his imaginary spurs.
I heard you looking for me, kid. Where are you? Oh.
I just rode into town a little while ago. My horse is tied up outside. I wouldn't hold that balloon if I were you. You know, you see these notches on these suspenders here? There's 21 of them. You know what happens when I get 22?
What?
My pants fall down. That's why I have to wear this serape here.
What's going on? What happened?
happened to Squirm?
Squirming? Somewhere, someone's got a fistful of feathers. Why don't you come on down, son? Buy a little drink. Right now, I'm so thirsty I could belch dust. Barkeep, sarsaparilla for my friend, I'll sip danger.
Come on, Mork. Whoa, neat. How'd you do that?
There's some questions you can't answer, Billy, like how does Venus de Milo hitchhike? Mind if I tinkle, Bill?
Wow, this is fun.
Yeah, ain't it? It wasn't always that much fun, Billy, especially when there were guns involved. You know, sometimes there might be a real intense game going on here with people sitting in those chairs. Let your imagination wander. Yeah. See what happens.
What I think here is we have a failure to deal an honest hand.
Yeah, you're accusing me of cheating. I'm telling you, you're accusing me of cheating. No.
I'm just saying you've got a face so ugly a coyote should beat it out with a stick.
I'm telling you, you're telling me that? Don't you dare talk to me like that. Yep, that's what he said. Happy tree.
Oh, stuff it, Roy, and I don't mean trigger. Here, don't you understand? There's a lot of stuff going down here. You'll never go on here. What's he saying? I don't know.
All right, the rest of you, come on, quit hiding from it. They're not doing diddly. Let's get down to the action.
That's it. You've all done it now. You've had it now.
So we get a whole bunch of celebrity impressions back and forth, including Strother Martin, Ray Rogers, Cabby Hayes, John Wayne, and a couple others. Again, Billy doesn't know that Mork is an alien, but he's young enough he's not really questioning that Mork is able to do these amazing things. And it's a little bit like Mork's relationship with Eugene, although not as deep. With his own voice, Mork asks if that seems like fun to him. Billy admits that it's pretty scary. That's just what Uncle Mork wanted to hear. Mork guesses that they can head home and talk about this later. They'll remember it when they're older. Billy says nope and aims the balloon. Mork says, "Oh no, Mayday, AMRAC, all systems alert." Mork has referred to AMRAC before, and I'm not finding anything on the internet. It keeps trying to redirect me to Amtrak. I'm guessing that that's some kind of movie reference. He also says Damien Part 4. Again, I try not to look at specifics on these episodes, but apparently when they taped this, Mork kept saying that Corey Feldman looked like Damien. Little teasing pop culture joke there. Billy tells Mork that it's all over. He throws a balloon at Mork's chest, despite Mork protesting again. Mork's death scene is very much a parody of Sam Peckinpah westerns, and the audience definitely appreciates it. Billy says he won. Billy the Kid did it again. Mindy comes back and asks what happened. She goes to Mork and kneels beside him, lifting Mork's head. Billy tells Mork to get up. The game's over. Mindy snaps at him that violence isn't a game. Billy says, but it was just pretend.
Mork, are you all right? Mork?
Min, is Billy nearby? I can't see too clearly.
No. I think he's a doctor.
Gee, I wish my dad were here. He's a doctor. There's a cold trough outside. I'll go get a cold washcloth.
Okay. Oh, no. Mork.
Min, can you stop doing that? You're curling my eyebrows.
Wait a minute. You mean you're all right?
Oh, Min, as I fell through the air, I had this incredible idea. I thought I might just wing it, you know? I mean, Squirrelman had this incredible flair for the dramatic.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you're all right, but I think I'd like to wring your neck.
Oh.
This wasn't part of our plan.
Shh, Mindy, think Gandhi, nonviolence. We are not here, not be here now, if not get there later.
And to Mindy, I leave all of my Tupperware. It's all right, Billy. It was just a game. Kind of heavy stakes, but just a game.
I'm sorry. Get better. I saw my dad do this. I hope it works.
Oh, I have a feeling it will.
Yes. 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 I'm healed. Yay. Praise the power. I had a vision. I saw the Cadillac was coming to carry me home. You did it, Billy. Praise you. Yay.
I think you saved his life.
I did, didn't I? I made Mork better.
Yep. Well, you think you want to be Billy the Kid anymore?
No way. I've got a new hero now.
Who's that, Bill?
You, Mork.
So we get Mindy genuinely worried about Mork and then annoyed later. She realizes that it is just pretend. And we have Billy go through regret and then realizing that he can take something that his father taught him and be a better person and help somebody. And there's another Tupperware reference. Of course, Mork does a televangelist bit. We can hear a child laugh after Mindy says she thinks that Billy saved Mork's life, and I'm not sure why that was funny to them. Maybe because the kid was figuring out, oh, but he didn't really save Mork's life. And it's sweet that Mork is Billy's new hero. Billy lets go and says he'd better get home now. His mom and dad will be worried, in case you're wondering if his dad was a single parent. He asks if it's all right if he throws his bike in Mindy's Jeep. She says sure. Mork says it's better than the other way around. Billy happily runs outside. Mindy says, well, another day, another nervous breakdown, which I think she should get as a bumper sticker for her Jeep. Billy comes back and peers through the swinging doors. He says somebody left the Jeep lights on. He leaves. Remember how he said sometimes Mork learns a lesson and then doesn't retain it for very long? He forgot this one within less than 24 hours. Mork goes to Mindy, who's got her hands in her pockets, probably to keep herself from hitting him. He knows what she's thinking, but it was actually advanced planning. They'll need those lights at night when they have to look for the car keys he lost. She says, oh, Mork, and gives him the accompanying look. My guess is if the gas station is within walking distance, they can walk to the gas station and get help there. So they're not as bad off as they could be, but it still probably is annoying. Mindy pats his chin. He tells her that patience is not only a virtue, in this case, it's a necessity. Surprisingly calmly, she says she'll wait for him outside. He puts on his hat and, as a cowboy, says, thanks, folks, meaning all those characters that he used to help teach Billy a lesson. He blows out a finger gun. The player piano plays Oh, Susanna again, and we fade out on that. There's a nighttime exterior of the house. Mork summons Orson. Mork is now wearing a white cowboy hat, so he has achieved hero status. Bebo is dressed as a Native American with feathers and a headband, even though he doesn't seem to have a head. As a cowboy, Mork calls Orson partner and Bronco Billy, so I was surprised that he didn't do some kind of ponderous oh-so joke or something more insulting. Orson tells him to get a grip on himself, so Mork says yes sir and grabs his own arm. He says it's just him and his sidekick Beebs hanging around, like Beebs is his Gabby Hayes. He indicates that Orson doesn't understand this. Bebo gibbers. Mork's report this week is heroes. As John Wayne, he says he's not tucking sandwiches. Orson asks if there are many heroes on Earth. As himself, Mork says yes sir, there are, but it seems that only the ones with pizzazz get the spotlight. He asks how many times Orson has seen Albert Schweitzer's picture on a bubblegum card. I don't know that Orson has ever seen Albert Schweitzer or a bubblegum card. Mork says maybe it's because Schweitzer can't throw a good curveball, but isn't that being a little picky? Orson says it sounds like Earthlings equate heroism with glamorous deeds. Mork thinks so. It's probably good for the t-shirt industry. This is definitely the t-shirt bumper sticker era. Mork says you always hear about the man who jumps over 13 buses, but you never hear about the John Doe that put him back together again. Orson asks, who's John Doe? Mork says, exactly, sir. This is a reference, of course, to Evel Knievel, who actually jumped over 14 buses in 1979, but it also made me think of the Happy Days episodes where Fonzie jumps over, yes, a shark, but also in a 1975 episode he tries to jump over 14 garbage cans. Mork thinks that that's why most real heroes seldom get a headline of their own. He says, imagine this, sir. As Walter Cronkite, he says, today millions of Earthlings help one another. No film at 11. And that's all she wrote. We'll get back to you next week if we get that grant from the Chrysler Foundation. And I thought he shifted his voice a little at the end, so maybe he was doing a PBS voice at the end, like the McNeil Lehrer Hour, which started in 75, but wasn't as obvious as Cronkite. He says, Nanu, Nanu, and then he slips in one more imitation when he says, it's cute, you'll like it, it's got a nice feel. That's why I was looking at internet write-ups about this episode, because I had to confirm that this was him imitating Gary Marshall again. So there's definitely some fourth wall breaking and irony to this episode. I didn't really remember much about this episode other than that Corey Feldman came back. And it actually turned out to be the best episode of the season so far. I rate each of these episodes on a 0 to 4 egg scale, which measures what I'm looking for in this series. And I thought this was a solid 3. A few minor little plot holes, but nothing compared to recently. Some genuinely funny lines and imitations. There's not much to the Mindy plot, but it is dealt with. It's nice to get a bit of Exodore and Fred, not their best. Still nice to see them. The daycare kids are used well. I enjoyed Corey Feldman having an arc. They certainly could have brought him back more. Also liked the saloon set. That was nice. Just generally solid entertainment with a message that doesn't entirely work, but I think it does in some ways work better than Mork's greatest hits. How do you teach pacifism to a kid who worships Billy the Kid? Yes, once again, I was reminded of a Brady Bunch episode. In Bobby's Hero, Bobby looks up to Jesse James and also has to learn a lesson about the reality of the Wild West versus the fantasy of it. In some ways, that's a darker episode. All that said, I don't really have a lot to say about this episode. I can see why it doesn't stay with me as much as some others. I also rate these episodes on a 0 to 4 heart scale, which measures how well it supports and promotes the romantic relationship between Mork and Mindy. This is not a very shippy episode, of course, but we do have them teaming up, and there are little moments, little touches in him wanting to see her in a wet sweater contest, and her concern and then annoyance when he fakes his injury. An episode worth watching, and not just if you want to see the career of a very young Corey Feldman. 3 eggs, 1 heart. This is Paula Schaffner with episode 54, Gunfight at the Morkay Corral. Nanu Nanu, partner.
In days of yore, in western lore, a man returned from civil war. His heart beat pure beneath his vest. His name was Best, best of the West. But not alone did he come home. His newfound bride was at his side, and with his boy who did protest, they all came west to live with me.
Yippee-ki-yi-yo, yippee-ki-yi-yay, give 3 mighty cheers. Yippee-ki-yi-yo, yippee-ki-yi-yay, for the Western pioneers.
And off they rode, this family, and man and wife. His boy makes 3, it's through their deeds this land progressed. Hooray for Best, best of the West.